So before we get into this, I just want to point out that this is the current state of CounterStrike Deathmatch. 95% of the people we're fighting are actually just case farming bots. They are not real players. I tried to get some gaming footage to put in the background for this, and this is what I ended up with. I suppose enjoy. I was having a conversation with my mom and my girlfriend, and we were talking about how we judge whether people are good or bad people. And I realized this idea, which I suppose is an idea that a lot of people realize throughout their lives. And it should be kind of obvious, but I guess it isn't. Maybe it's obvious to you, it wasn't obvious to me, and I've been thinking about it a little bit since then. So we tend to judge people whether they're good or bad, right? So people you know are either good people or bad people. You might have had a teacher in high school who was very strict and mean, and you judged them as the strict and mean teacher. Maybe you didn't like them, maybe you didn't like the class that they were giving. There must also have been somebody else at school you disliked, maybe a mean girl or a bully or someone like that. And we know a lot of these people throughout our lives that we just judge as bad people. We consider them bad people and we don't like them. We don't get along with them. But what struck me about this idea was realizing that that bad person is probably someone's best friend. That bad person probably cares really deeply about the people around them, just in the same way we care really deeply about the people around us. So why is it that we would see people as bad people, and why would they come across as bad people too, yet they probably lead equally deep and meaningful lives as what we do? So that's an interesting topic I would like to discuss. It's not necessarily that we just have limited interactions with people either. You know, you might judge someone as a bad person based on one interaction, but the high school teacher that you had all year long, you judge them as bad as well, and it wasn't limited to only one interaction, right? The thing is also that we see them in specific contexts. We don't see them in their full lives. We don't see that mean person at home with their parents or looking after their sick grandmother or anything like that. We just see them in the context where we judge them. So like I say, the person you think is bad has his entire friend group just like you do that also loves him. You know, they might be the life of the party somewhere, they might be their grandma's favorite child, and all we do is, by seeing this tiny slice of their lives, we call it the whole picture, you know? The coworker everyone avoids at work is probably hilarious with their friends, and we don't see that. We can't picture that person being funny, we can't picture them with a sense of humor, and in that case, context matters in that kind of scenario because people act different around different people, right? You don't act the same in front of your parents as you would in your friend group, and I don't act the same around my friends as I would around my grandparents, for example. And I don't think that's because we're two-faced or something. It's just a contextual thing, right? The kind of jokes I make to my friends are not the jokes I make to my mom. So in the case of context, it's also that that person may be having a terrible day on your first interaction. I get that that's not really an excuse. You know, if you're having a bad day and you take that out on somebody irrelevant, that kind of speaks to how poorly you handle things. But at the same time, we all do it. That's something we all do. If I'm annoyed, if I'm having a bad day, I might not be the friendliest person around. I might be mean to an Uber driver. I might act annoyed, and that's not something I'm immediately in control of, even though I should be. I believe we all do something like this. So you got to kind of give people a pass when you consider that. When I was younger, I was also really shy and reserved. I had trouble interacting with people. I had trouble interacting at school, speaking up, and I used to mumble a lot, for example. And people used to think that I was very rude. But the truth is, it's not that I was rude or didn't want to speak to them. It's just that I couldn't. I struggled to do so. So my inner struggle looked different to those people than what the inner struggle actually was. So I'm sure in a lot of cases we also see people's actions in a specific way, and it's not necessarily the way they intend them, whether they deliberately intend them or whether that's just how they naturally come across. And a lot of times we won't notice because we're not in the inner circle of that person. So entering confirmation bias now as well. Once we decide someone is bad or once we decide someone is a particular way, our brain kind of locks in on that. So the teacher who was mean on the first day of school, for the rest of the term, you thought that this was a bad and mean teacher. This is a nasty, mean person, but in actual fact, we stuck on that one thing we got from that interaction and we haven't really thought of it any further than that. But I'm certain that that teacher that we thought was mean and could couldn't care less, actually cared about their students, had a heart for people going through things. They probably had pets at home that they loved, took care of, families, things like that. They were mentors for people. So it's always weird that we consider things so superficially when it comes to certain people, yet forget that there is a lot that goes on around them. And when we think someone's bad, we kind of start to look for evidence to prove ourselves right. So we will think someone is bad, even though they might do 10 good things. And as soon as they do one thing that either upsets us or doesn't align with how we think, immediately we go, see, I told you he's bad, and we confirm that bias of ours. And you know what? I think we find it because we look for it. We always ignore and reinterpret the neutral and good things people do, especially if we've come to the conclusion that they're bad people, and our judgment likes to protect itself. I think as people, our judgment protects itself. As a person, I want to prove my thoughts right. So I look for the things that confirm the way I think. I try to confirm the way I think, and this is what is weird to me about that entire conversation. I judge people as bad before they actually do anything wrong. It's either a vibe I get or an interpretation of an action that they've done, but like I said, they may just be having a bad day. They may be unhappy that day, they may have lost someone close to them, we really don't know. We just hop on that and go, see, I'm right, because months later they do something that is genuinely bad, because as humans we make mistakes and we say to ourselves, I knew it, exactly, I was right, they're bad. And we take that one time out of the 100 actions that the person does, and we use that to confirm every single time afterwards about other people when they're bad as well, because we think we're some kind of genius at reading people, when in fact it's not that we're lucky or that we're right. It's just every person does something bad at one or another point, whether it's going to be to you or in their lives or to someone else, it doesn't really matter. Now, we probably do this as well to save ourselves a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, because if we assume that people are bad and we push people away or at least keep them at a certain distance, then we never let them close enough to hurt us. And obviously I'm not talking about crimes and crazy things like that. That's kind of a separate conversation and an exception. I just mean things like impoliteness, coldness, rudeness, etc., etc. We never ask ourselves if we treat people coldly because we judge them and they're responding to our coldness. We never ask ourselves if the way we're interacting with that person or the way we have them framed in our minds is shaping the interaction with them, which then in and of itself kind of makes them react in the same way. And we quickly forget that we're just ignoring evidence that contradicts our judgment, and we like to amplify the evidence that proves our judgment. So it's difficult for me to think about it if I think about it in a numbers perspective. It's difficult to imagine that only I am a mentor to some people, that only I'm someone's best friend. People look up to me and ask for help, and they don't do that to other people because other people are bad. But for everybody else to not have the same thing going on in the background in their lives, that doesn't really make sense if you think about it. People must have a friend group. People must have parents who are hopefully proud of them. They are likely working towards certain goals and have certain achievements behind them. I'm sure people ask them for help, they ask for expertise. So like I say, it doesn't make sense to consider people bad immediately. Surely there are very, very few bad people in the world then. We just tend to see people in a bad light. Maybe I'm a judgmental person. I don't know if this is globally applicable, but I am going to try to reframe how I see things. I want to be clear that I'm not trying to include new people in my inner circle. I don't want to get to know new people, but I do think that next time when I meet somebody and I'm sure that they're a bad person and I made that conclusion and judgment about them, I'm actually going to stop myself and ask what I'm not seeing. I need to remember that I'm probably the villain in loads of people's story as well, and that it doesn't make sense to think that only the good people are the people I know, and everybody else isn't. So this is my thing going forward. I turn 30 years old this year, and I feel like at some point I had to realize this. At some point I needed to make this conclusion, and I guess better late than never. I didn't have a plan when making this video, I just thought I would ramble on, get my thoughts out there, and through this, I'll use this as my way to keep myself on track with this idea.